It's Thursday. It's 6 o'clock. Crackerjack. It's one of my favorite shows. I absolutely love doing this show. I cannot believe this is episode 39.
Russ,
Episode 39. Hello.
it's very strange. You're on my side of the bed.
I know this is very odd.
It's very weird. Can you switch us, please? There we go. Jesus, I was just like, what is going on? I felt really awkward. Literally just woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
I was very worried. That brought back terrible memories.
Come on, producer.
moving on. Thanks, Sinner. We're talking about the unsung hero of the ABC of CBD here on Men's Radio. Thanks a lot, Sinner, for doing that. The guy all behind the scenes there. There's been somebody. I'm not going to take away Ollie's thunder at all, but all during the 39 episodes, I would say out of at least 20 of the episodes, one man's name, I'm not going to say who it is, it's Ollie's shout, has been mentioned by so many people. And to Ollie's thrilled amazement, Ollie will speak about this guy with such enormous awe and respect. So it's a thrill to have him. You can hear us, of course, on Men's Radio, on Twitter, and please go to our YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, press the like button, and that would be great. It would really help us out. Anyway, that's enough from me. Ollie Merriman, the stage is yours.
Welcome to the ABC of CBD, everyone. Episode 39. Before we get on with the show, which is going to be an incredible one, let's have a quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll just get that ship rolling. I'm sure you've heard before that good quality CBD needs to be really, really expensive. This is the new view of CBD. A product created by users for users. A product at an affordable price, available everywhere, at any time, at the simple click of a button. Just CBD and MCT oil. No additives, no preservatives, and no flavor enhancers. It's a simple subscription-based service. The cleanest possible CBD delivered to your door for the lowest possible price. Your product, your rights for the lowest possible price. I know ships don't roll. Okay, I know ships don't roll. I love that. The little magic box.
It's a running gag with Ollie and myself.
The light.
There we go.
Completely off topic. Brain just came to brain. Isn't it funny that when you send something by car, it's called a shipment, and when you send something by boat, it's called cargo? Bit strange, isn't it? Just think about that.
What?
Anyway,
did you think of that?
No, I was just thinking because I said the rolling ship. Let's get the ship rolling. And I was like, why did I think of that? And I was just like, shipments go by car, cargoes go by ship. Quite strange. Yeah. Anyway, this week we are joined by Professor Mike Barnes, which is absolutely incredible. Now, over the last several years, the UK cannabis market has grown, and one medical voice has been a constant in support of medical cannabis, the necessity for it, and the lacking of a structure around it. Professor Mike Barnes has made it his life's work for cannabis to be classified as medicinally legal and readily available for those who need it. Professor Barnes has been on the forefront of conversations regarding medical cannabis access, medical cannabis application, medical cannabis education, and the politics which surround this industry in the 360-degree blanket of bureaucratic challenges. Professor Barnes is well known and well respected across the industry, as he was actively involved in this space before there was one, preaching the benefits of medical cannabis and trying to influence some kind of change. As someone who has lived alongside his patients and their trauma, and the trauma of loved ones around him, Professor Barnes has openly spoken out about cannabis as having medicinally beneficial properties for many years. And he has done so without the support which he so rightly deserves and needs. For many years, his opinions were neglected, ignored, or worse, put down. But this has not deterred him on his journey. Today in the UK, where medical cannabis is legal and readily available for those who want it and need it, the community still faces the same oppositions that have been in front of Professor Barnes for years. Patients are still seeing brick walls where doors are supposed to be open. The medical cannabis system is riddled with problems. This has been spoken about over the last several weeks by all of our guests. Hannah Deacon making an urgent plea for other children to be granted the same medication as her son Alfie. Sarah Godfrey discussing how she cannot access what she needs through any UK-based medicinal system for her Crohn's disease, and without cannabis, she would die. Dr. Rebecca Moore, the trained consultant psychiatrist, speaking out against the false education surrounding mental health and cannabis. And then we heard about injustices from the lawyer Robert Jappi, Phil Monk, that activist legend who came on a couple of times and shared his story with us, Guy Coxall, who writes these incredible reports, and the many others who have come out and spoken about the injustices in this legal yet closed system. In 2018, the medical cannabis system was stamped as medicinally legal, but there was still no structure, no shape, no foundation to even build upon. And still, this is very much lacking. Access is limited because the market is limited. There are about 10,000 doctors in the UK. 61 of them prescribe cannabis, about 60 of which only work with adults. As we heard from Hannah Deacon last week, there is one doctor in the UK who's willing to work with epileptic children. Mental, which means there's 9,939 doctors, give or take, who are not doing all they can for their patients, and the system is not working as it should. But our guest today is doing more than he can for patients everywhere who might want cannabis. He's helping to nurture a system that was created, dumped, and then abandoned. And he's trying his hardest to make it into something which is good for all of us. Professor Barnes is an active patient defender, a long-term cannabis advocate, a medical cannabis educator, founder of the first medical cannabis clinic in the UK, currently medical lead for Cannabis Research Project, Project 21, founder of the CIC, and so much more. Let's welcome on Professor Mike Barnes. It is an honor to have you on the ABC of CBD.
Thank you very much. That's quite some introduction.
I write the best introductions. I mean, like literally, everyone says
it's a great introduction.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's downhill from here, so I think we better just stop at this point. I just wave.
That's it. Well, thanks, Professor Barnes.
Yeah, that's
for
it.
joining
It's
been a great show.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks,
it's
everybody.
A
Bye.
But if I ever fail in what I do, I will write introductions for people for a living because I think they're pretty good. Okay, like I nearly made Hannah Deacon cry last week, which is pretty awesome. You know, I like making girls cry in a good way. Do you know? In a good way. In a good way. Okay. So back onto the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate having you here. I'm just going to fire out a few questions with you. Like I said, I know that there are things you want to talk about as well. So at any moment, if there's anything you just want to dump on us, this is your platform. And
fine, you fire away and we'll see where we go.
Fine. So your first interaction with cannabis as a medicine, when was it? You know, like when's the first time you kind of got introduced to this world, and when did you start your journey for all of us?
It was actually about 20 years ago now, I think. Long time. I'm a neurologist. I was a neurologist. I don't think I can call myself that now. Certainly a lot of people don't call me that. But I was running at the time multiple sclerosis clinics where I live in Newcastle upon Tyne up in the north. And people were beginning to come to the clinics and saying to me, well, I'm trying cannabis now and it's really helpful for my pain or my muscle spasticity. So just very informally, I thought, that's probably not right. I'd asked everyone who came to the clinic. It was 50 or 60 people. I never published that or anything. I just chatted as they came to the clinic. And I was astonished that about half of that unselected clinic in an ordinary city, I shouldn't call it that. God, I'd be shot down. You've lost all your viewers from Newcastle now. In the great city of Newcastle, about half of the people coming to that clinic were using cannabis. And I thought, well, for God's sake, it's they're criminalizing themselves. It was totally legal then, as it largely is now. They were very disabled people. They were going out to unknown parts of the city or getting their relatives to get it for them. And if they were risking all that and risking, I think it's 5 years in prison for possession, isn't it? And 14 years for possession with intent to supply. They're risking all that. It must be doing something. So that's what first dawned on me. There must be something to this plant. And then by chance, because I was working in muscle spasm spasticity research, I was asked to help GW Pharma, who are big, I'm sure many people will know, is one of the biggest cannabis company in the world, I think. And
they're the company who just sold for 5.7 billion. Do you remember we were talking about
7
point. I wished I'd kept the shares in that. I wouldn't have been sitting here talking to you now. I would have been on some yacht somewhere, but I didn't keep those shares, which shows you if you want ever me to come on and tell you about my investor tips, It's probably best
that was
not
my
to,
next
really.
thing. That was my next thing, Professor Mike. We're going to, obviously on our business programs, we'd love you.
Yeah, do.
No one ever. Okay.
Yeah. Whatever I say, do the opposite, and you'll be absolutely fine. So, I forgot what I was saying. Now, GW Pharma asked me to get involved with what turned out to be the first licensed cannabis medicine, which is still around.
Sativex, right?
Sativex, yes. Licensed for multiple sclerosis spasticity, basically. And I helped with that. Then there was a bit of a gap for at least a decade because NICE said that Sativex wasn't cost effective, and I think they were probably right at that point in time. So that gap lasted up to about 5 years ago now, when I was asked to do a report for the All-Party Parliamentary Group, the UK Parliamentary Group on Drug Policy Reform. I did that with my daughter, who's a psychologist. They gave us a month to do it, and we did that. We looked at about 20,000 references. It was interesting, and there's stuff I knew about, and a lot of stuff I didn't know about. And then it's one of these things where you suddenly, because you're the only person to have written something, you suddenly become an expert at it, if you know what I mean, because there's no one else to ask, really. So that was that. And then as a result of that, I was asked to help with getting the first ever license, which was for Alfie Dingley, that you heard about last week.
I just got to say one thing quickly.
That gets
you put yourself down a little. So you put yourself down a little bit there. Okay. You're the expert because you're the only one who wanted to know. And you're the expert because you spent the time reading and you spent the time learning and you immersed yourself into an idea, and that's why you became the expert. You didn't become the expert because no one else had the information you had. You became the expert because no one else cared about the information that you had. It was there for them to also expert themselves up, but they didn't. I just have to throw that out there. Probably the first of many compliments I'm going to give you tonight.
I'm still recovering from the fact that you did this huge report in a month.
It was. I don't know why I said yes to that, but it was a month. It was fun, but it was a lot of work for a month. But it was worth doing because it's led to all this. So if I'd said no to that, I would have been retired by now and relaxing somewhere and probably enjoying myself.
Fair play. So tell us more about this report. So you worked with your daughter.
Yeah. They wanted us to look at the efficacy of cannabis across all indications. Now, I was a neurologist. I knew about the neurological things, spasticity, pain a little bit. I didn't know what else it did because I'd had no reason to look into it. And they wanted to know the side effects and the whether it was safe and that stuff. So we did all that, and we put it together in a report. It was about 30 or 40 pages from memory, and gave it to the All-Party Parliamentary Group. And that was sort of widely talked about. It became known as the Barnes Report, which is nice. It's the only thing I haven't named after me, I suspect, but it's better than nothing. So that was that's how it kind of came to prominence, if you like. And I think, although cannabis has been talked about, of course it has for on and off for decades. There's the odd report here. There's the House of Lords Select Committee did a report on it. They've all just fallen by the wayside. As it happens, I think the timing was right for this one because it didn't fall by the wayside. It was a bit of a trigger to get the debate discussed again and then taken live, as it were. And great credit to Hannah that you talked to last week. She and her determination really pushed that through the media and pushed it into reality in the back end of 2018.
Incredible. The joint effort of this, of individuals in this community to get things put through. Yep. I mean, like Hannah spoke so highly of you as well, and saying about how you were so valuable on her son's journey as well. And I think it's incredible that you have these little links in our industry which show this incredible, beautiful, emotional connection between people trying to achieve something which has never been achieved before. And I think it's like the story of Alfie. The fact that it's a shame that he's only one of a couple of kids who get it, but the fact that he has got it means that there is hope. Do you know what I mean? It kind of gives hope for the rest of the community out there.
You have to start somewhere. I think that is, and although it's very frustrating, I'm looking on the sidelines here. I'm just a passenger, and Ollie is the captain of this particular vessel. If you start somewhere, it can grow.
We've got the mechanism now to grow it. It's just, and if we look back, what's happened in the last now 2.5 years, there's an awful lot that has happened, but there's when you're in it day to day, that it seems so frustratingly slow, and you get so many ridiculous opinions and ridiculous people popping up, and on both sides of the argument, frankly. I sometimes have to think to myself after another frustrating week, well, we're actually a long way further ahead than we were on November 18. I've got to hold on to that. We're getting there. Absolutely.
Right.
Good man. Right. Good man. So let's carry this on. So go on and let's talk about this. So you're working in the industry. So you started this report, and the report was around 5 years ago. And then you, like I said, everything happens quite slowly, but happens quite dramatically. I want to talk about the first medical cannabis clinic which you set up in the UK, because it was another milestone. It was something which wasn't really done before. Before that, all the cannabis kind of distribution was, I want to say, held in the hands of GW. It was a little bit more of a controlled system. If you weren't getting a GW product, you weren't getting a cannabis product in the UK. So, I mean, let's talk about that. How did that come into play? How was that process? Having done something that no one had done before, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, on the 1st of November 18, I was abroad, actually, but I thought that's good, job done, because now the legal pathway is there for this to be prescribed on the National Health Service. And I didn't expect it to be thousands overnight, but I did expect it to grow slowly but steadily, and it didn't. And there is still, we'll talk about that, no doubt, there's still a huge reluctance and stigma attached to it. And the NHS has only, as you said, prescribed for 3 all children, all strangely, 2 of them at least, high media profile. Well, you wonder why they've been approved and no one else, don't you, really? But high media profile children, and good luck to those parents, of course. But it was clear the NHS wasn't going to prescribe very quickly. And so I thought, and others, it wasn't just me, we need to set up something privately here. Now, I was very reluctant about that. I've never done private medicine. I'd not actually, my personal political stance is not really attuned to it. I'm much more NHS. But I thought, well, if the NHS isn't going to do anything, then the private sector can do something. Let's at least get it to the private sector. Yeah. And I was very conscious that wasn't right in a sense, because initially the costs were ridiculously high, and they still are too high for most people, but they were ridiculously high. They were 4 or 5 times what they are now. And, that effectively excludes the vast majority of the population. And the people who are desperate for this, particularly the parents of those children with epilepsy, and they've done ridiculous things. They've coffee mornings. They've sold businesses. They've sold their house, just to afford the stuff, which I think is scandalous. Anyway,
we heard this last week from Hannah about how someone sold their house, and it's
exactly
the fundraising as well. You hear about, like, Tanine will talk about her local community, like they're a population of saints, because without them, Indie Rose wouldn't be alive, and it's just it's pretty incredible. Like, what I don't understand is why the NHS. Like, why there's so much reluctancy to even humor
why so much resistance?
There's a lot of reasons. I think, in no particular order, ignorance. Because doctors, in fairness to them, never been taught about cannabis medicine. It's not on the medical curricula. It works with the endocannabinoid system, as we know, which is not also on the medical curriculum. I don't think in any medical school it's taught consistently. And so they don't know about the science behind it. And some of the doctors realize is, well, this is a sort of, this is a bit hippie, this is a bit antisocial, anti-establishment. It can't possibly do any medical good. And that prejudice and that stigma is still there, going back to the reefer madness in the 20s and 30s. And I'd have to generalize, but it's the senior doctors who are very anti this, and of course, and generally speaking, the junior doctors are much more attuned to it. And that's a generalization, I realize that. But sadly, it's the senior doctors who run things like the Royal College of Physicians or the British Pediatric Neurology Association, who have a lot of influence in this sector. And I know for certain there are doctors in the NHS who want to prescribe, but they don't want to go against the NICE guidelines. They don't want to go against their peers, who would criticize and say that you're a bit of an idiot doing this. And they think they've got their career and everything in front of them.
Well, you've been criticised, haven't you, Mike?
Yeah,
I have. You've been criticised. Like, I remember the first time I met you. The first time I met you was at a CTA conference. Okay, you had just spoken. It was at the Motorcycle Museum in Birmingham. And I remember you're sitting upstairs in the lobby, and I come up to you. I introduced myself. We were talking, and the first thing you said is, "It's nice to not get criticised," or something like that. It was just like one of the comments. It was like 5 years ago. It's nice to not get criticised, and I was just like, "That's quite lovely." You know, like, but how often do you get criticised?
Often. There's something about social media that is remarkably unpleasant, I have to say.
I'm surprised the trolls haven't come to me yet. I'm surprised the trolls haven't tried to destroy us yet.
I don't think it's interesting you say that, Professor Barnes, because right across both women's radio and men's radio, the whole issue of social media, the bullying, the trolling, the mental health issues that it causes. So it's very interesting that some of your status would say that. So
I think it's been very damaging, actually, to people. It seems to me that every, if I can say this, I know every nutter specializes in going on Twitter. And it's difficult to get a sensible intellectual conversation on Twitter. It degenerates into foul language and ridiculously over-the-top bigotry.
And name-calling. There's always the horrible name-calling.
I mean, God. I mean, I'm all for people not agreeing with me. I don't expect everyone. I do expect everyone to agree with me, but I realise
of course, you're a professor.
Exactly. Yeah. So I get mortally offended.
And so they should.
You've got letters after your name.
Exactly that. I quite agree. But, you know, a civilized, I find I sound dreadfully old-fashioned, don't I? But a civilized debate is fine. But the vituper, that's a good word, isn't it? Vituper, I can't even say it, it's so good.
I've got no idea what you're trying to say.
What you're going to say is the bloody nasty comments.
That's it. That's what I should have said. They've just been very unpleasant. You know,
it's interesting you say that, Professor Barnes, because only yesterday I reported something. Thank God it wasn't to me. It was to somebody I'd never met, but I had to follow, who was a writer. And they had death threats to their children over Harry and Meghan, of all people, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And I reported it to Metropolitan Police, and I reported it to Priti Patel, and they're actually taking action against this person, which they should, because it's completely unacceptable. That's a slight issue. But
also, I would get it if you're not trying to help people. Like, if you're the dude saying, you know, like, cannabis doesn't help kids and kids deserve to die, okay, you know, I would understand people throwing hate at you. But you're the dude saying, look, nothing else is working. Help these kids. Come on, someone help these kids. Someone do something. And that's why I don't understand. It's not like you're not sitting out there trying to push your views onto anyone. You're sitting out there trying to help people. It's a different...
You're making a valued judgment which people could look at and say yes or no. You're not, you know, there's no skin in the game, you're not selling products, etc., etc. It's quite extraordinary.
Professor Barnes, you said the education's lacking, right? But you do some, you do work around education and doctors in the UK, don't you?
Absolutely. I think that's really, really important. And I think it was Tony Blair that said education, wasn't it, a long time ago? And in cannabis space, that is the key. We've got to educate the doctors so they're not so bigoted and ignorant. We also need to educate some of the media, although in fairness, most of the media have been very sympathetic. I can't criticize most, not quite all, but most of the media. And the patients, you know, there's still a lot of ignorance, and I don't mean that rudely, ignorance out there about the nature of cannabis and what good it does and what harm it can do to some people. We shouldn't forget that. I think education is really important. My focus has been on education of my medical colleagues, and I've trained now about something around 150, I suppose.
Now, out of the 150 doctors you've trained, only 60 are practicing.
So far,
Okay, why are the other 80? I'm just asking. I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble, but like, why are the other 80, 90 doctors not getting involved? And they've gone out their way to educate themselves and arm themselves with a head of information. Why is that not being put to practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. Some, I think, will. It takes 3 or 4 months to get all the bureaucracy you need to prescribe in the private sector. It's all private sector still, sadly. So perhaps of those 80 that you mentioned, maybe 20 or 30 will. There's some who came on, and good for them. They came on because they said, I don't want to prescribe, but I wanted to inform myself so I can inform my patients whether this is right for them. And if I think it's right for them, then I'll refer them to those who know what they're doing. And that's absolutely great. They haven't closed their mind, but for whatever reason they don't want to prescribe it themselves. And I think that's absolutely fair. I don't care if they prescribe themselves. You don't need that many cannabis prescribing doctors, but you do need a damn sight more than we've got at the moment, of people who know what they're doing and can offer their patients an informed, sensible, balanced opinion, not a off-the-cuff, don't be ridiculous, that's going to harm you opinion, which we hear all the time.
Can I ask you this? Because this has been a huge learning curve for me. I came into it knowing zero, and with Ollie and Ollie's extraordinary guests like yourself, I have sort of learnt so much, and my opinions have swung. Even if you don't like it intellectually, what I fail to understand is when you see some of the videos that some of Ollie's guests have shown of, these little babies having convulsive fits, the heartbreaking stories, even as on the level of humanity and emotion, you'd think that doctors would say, this is just awful.
Yeah, I agree with you, Russ.
This is what puzzles me. I don't understand.
It puzzles me, genuinely puzzles me. I mean, if there's a small child, let's keep to the children for the moment, but it applies to adults with pain and everything else. A small child is having hundreds of seizures a day, literally hundreds a day.
Yeah. They've
tried every licensed anticonvulsant there is. They've tried other non-pharmaceutical treatments like ketogenic diets, and then there's nothing else to offer them. Why, in God's name, don't those people think, let's try this? And there's good evidence now that it works. It works for something like 85% of those children, when there's 0% effectiveness from the licensed medication, and it's safe. The other thing, if it was a medicine that stood a chance of killing you off, then sure, we have to balance, like anything in medicine, we have to balance the benefits and the side effects.
Like if there were side effects, the child might explode. Do you know what I mean? I would understand that, but there's no negative side effects.
No, I mean, you've got to be a little bit careful. It's not like any medicine. It's not right for everybody. There are side effects you can get. You've got to know what you're doing. But generally speaking, it's remarkably safe. And if it's safe on one side and might work on the other side, why on earth are they so antagonistic to it? It genuinely beats me. I have no idea.
I've got to ask the question, and Ollie's going to roll his eyes, I know. But is there still the belief somehow that it's a gateway drug? And one minute you try this, and the next minute you're under the bridge at Waterloo, shooting up whatever.
Yeah, there is that. There's those who think you're going to go mad on the streets, or everyone who takes it gets psychotic. There's those who think it's a gateway drug, but even a child is a gateway drug to heroin and cocaine abuse? I don't really think so. But that's just crazy. So there are those arguments around, and some elements of the more right-wing press still promulgate those arguments. But it's just complete nonsense. Even for adults, I would move away from children. You don't prescribe it for every adult. If you've had a schizophrenic episode or a psychotic episode, or you've just had a heart attack and you don't want a heart rate speeded up, there's good, solid reasons why you would not prescribe to everybody, like any medicine. But, it's remarkably safe if you prescribe it sensibly and cautiously. So why the hell aren't we using it?
So back onto kids and this sort of demonization. I'm going to skip a few points and work our way back because I think it fits in quite well. We were talking about the British Pediatric Neurological Association, and we were the BPNA, and actually got brought up by Hannah Deacon last week as well about the fact that they are targeting pediatric doctors who are prescribing cannabis and striking them off and taking away their licenses and basically stopping doctors getting involved in the legal system or something like that. It's a little bit mental. I was just a bit like, but it's legal. It's medicine illegal. I can get my head around it.
I mean, for the children, we struggled hugely to get any pediatric neurologist to prescribe. And I agree, ideally, it should be an epilepsy child specialist, a pediatric neurologist. That's the community that do that. I don't disagree with that at all. But could we find a pediatric neurologist to prescribe? No. So we were getting a bit desperate. So we found a guy who probably should be nameless for here, but is a pediatric rheumatologist. So he's used to dealing with children, A, and children with disabilities, B, but he's not a neurologist. I trained him with cannabis medicine. He was a very good, sensible prescriber. He tried to work hand in hand with a treating pediatric neurologist because every child had their own consultant, if you were. He wrote to them. Yet still the British Pediatric Neurology Association wrote to the General Medical Council and complained that he was prescribing when he wasn't a pediatric neurologist. It's up to the GMC to strike people off, and he's not. The GMC have said that he is quite safe and is okay to prescribe, and it's legal to prescribe. Yet they keep pursuing people. I wrote to them and said, what are you going to do about this? Because that doctor has been so fed up with the whole thing, he's now in the process of retiring and moving back home to Israel. And then we'll be left with no pediatric neurologist to prescribe for these children. So I wrote to them saying, what can we do about this together? I'm happy to train one or two of your doctors free of charge, no problem. And they wrote back and said, other than all the bump about we care for children and such like, they basically said, if you prescribe, we'll refer you to the GMC.
Wow.
So it's not just a we don't like this, we're having nothing to do with it. It's a totally antagonistic view to those who do want to do something about it. I find it immoral, frankly.
And then the demonization of cannabis, it's right there. So how can a I want to say government body, how can a medicinal body on one half of it say this is completely okay and basically green light it, and then on the other half of it say, all right, by the way, if you go over that green light, you're going to get a ticket as if you went through a red.
Your career's
just
over.
mental. It's mental.
It is. I wish I understood their motivation. I really do, and it's
sad.
I genuinely don't.
I'm just going to read a quick comment, then I'm going to ask a question if I can, Professor Barnes. It's for Veronica Curran, who's up in Edinburgh. My GP has been supportive and wrote to the pain clinic, who refused. I'm now taking oils instead of the A to Z of opioids that I've been put through for chronic pain. So there we are. There, she got through over the first, horse racing terminology. She got over the first hurdle and then fell at the second fence. So,
you're right.
Like Jonathan Nadler said, you have to self-refer. It's the only way. The only way is you go and get your doctor's notes. You go to your private doctor. You go in there with your notes and say, I want cannabis. Because if you're expecting a door to be opened for you, the system's not there. The doors don't have hinges. That's not going to open. It's all false. It's all a set. It's like a movie.
My question that I was thinking was this, and I'm not a conspirator. I write conspiracy books, but I'm not a conspiracy person myself, which is often the case. Is this, people say, but it's all big. They always yell the phrase big pharma as though they know exactly what that means. And without a lot of the pharmaceutical products, a hell of a lot of people will be dead or horribly ill.
Absolutely.
They're not all evil going whoa, and counting their money and going away in a top hat and a big cloak. But is it because the pharma has the pharmaceutical companies are too entrenched? Is there lobbying at parliamentary level?
Yes.
Is that one of the things?
Yeah, it is. It doesn't surprise, of course, it doesn't surprise anyone who thinks about it in a capitalist sort of society, because if you use cannabis or prescribe cannabis, there'll be less prescription of anticonvulsant drugs, less prescription of painkillers, less prescription of anti-anxiety drugs, etc., etc. All of which means less profit for the pharmaceutical industry. There's about 25% reduction of opioid use if you introduce cannabis, 25% less deaths, incidentally, which is probably a good thing, but no one seems to realize that. So yes, there has been lobbying from the pharmaceutical industry, definitely. I mean, very anti-lobbying of me personally, of others in the space. It has been very unpleasant. I think we're beginning to see, if we can't beat them, join them attitude. Some of the big pharma, and particularly in Canada, where things are further ahead than we are now buying into the big cannabis. We're also seeing, interestingly, big alcohol. I keep calling it that. I keep using the word big. Big alcohol and big tobacco also buying in, because if you introduce cannabis, there's less cigarettes smoked. Again, it's all 25%. It's easy to remember for me. 25% less tobacco and 25% less consumption of alcohol.
Are there any other bigs? Big alcohol, big pharma, big tobacco.
Yeah, the big. I'm not sure about
big
that.
Media.
About that. Big media. But anyway, they're losing money, so we're seeing investment now in the cannabis space, which is a good.
It's very good.
One of Ollie's guests a few weeks back was in it's either Canada or Kentucky or somewhere, and of course, the cigarette smoking is going down.
Yeah.
And so the people who are growing the tobacco in these huge fields are going, this isn't working for us. I know, let's grow hemp. and make a lot of money. So these things, I mean, to use the most ridiculously overused cliche, follow the money.
Yeah.
If they realize there's just as much money to be made in this as pumping out whatever it might be, they'll switch over, and suddenly it'll all be a marvelous thing. It was always marvelous, and Professor Barnes was a genius.
It was exactly. I'm waiting for my, my international recognition on a statue.
That's your OBE.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, exactly.
But this is exactly how it works.
Professor.
And then you and Ollie will be sitting there going, "Oh, for God's sake!"
Professor.
It's life.
That's what it will be. It'll be Professor.
No, it'll be Professor Sir Michael Barnes.
So Professor Sir.
Yeah. Let's just dwell on that for another minute or so. That's the nearest I'm going to come to it, I tell you.
So let's carry this on. So basically, I read something last week. I read an article about you. And it was basically a plea to doctors. And I'm saying seeing patients suffering firsthand, knowing all of the stories of patients having limited access to cannabinoids they need, and having seen the relatively slow growth in the UK medicinal cannabis market since 2018. How do you think this can be improved to stop patient suffering and to grow a medicinally beneficial, economically beneficial cannabis system? And you were basically that was kind of like the topic of what you were talking about. And you were talking about how you need GPs to prescribe, and you wanted to have a self-sufficient UK cannabis market. And I just want you to kind of go into that a little bit more, because it's something I'm really strongly believe in. I've said it over again, products are imported, there's import duties, and as a manufacturer we work on this 3x, but as a retailer they work on 10x, which means I make something for £3, sell it to them for 12, they sell it for 120. That is the model of retail. There's a model of manufacturers and retail. There's about 15x between the cost of a good and the sale price of the good. So that pack of gum, which you buy from the supermarket for £1, originally cost 1 penny. Then it was sold for 5 pennies, and it was sold for 20 pennies or 10 pennies, and then it was sold for the pound. And I've always said that, the UK cannabis market's not going to achieve anything until we basically can almost produce here and supply patients here and lose all of those X's which are added onto a product. Now, it was a big topic of an article you wrote. Actually, we started speaking just after it. And I was just saying, it's a big problem, isn't it? Not having a UK supply, and it's a big problem.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And, as you've just said, all cannabis is imported. Ironically, considering GW Pharma is one of the biggest producers in the world, and it's grown in this country, it all leaves this country, and none of it comes back again in its raw form. It comes back as Sativex and Epidiolex. So all the unlicensed products we're prescribing at the moment are imported. And compounded even more stupidly, to divert slightly, hemp, as I'm sure your listeners know, hemp is cannabis. It's grown over the centuries for its strong stalk, but it's got a flower, and that flower contains high CBD. And in this country, and you have to grow it under a hemp license, but you have to then destroy the flowers from the hemp plant. And so all CBD on the shelves of this country are all imported as well, because we actually have to burn the flowers from which the UK could generate the CBD. How crazy is that? Just ridiculous. Anyway, we absolutely need a UK market for lots. Let's put the patients first. For the patient supply chain, that's really important, because there's been hiccups. It's been problems with Brexit, problems with COVID, but generally supply chain issues. But also, of course, we shouldn't forget our paper that we did back in March showed that you could generate about, in round terms, 100,000 jobs from a good quality UK cannabis industry. And that's really needed, again, post-Brexit, post-COVID.
That's extraordinary.
It's a huge industry.
Wow.
Even more important than the 100,000 jobs. Okay, so if you work out, there's about 7.8 million active cannabis users in the UK. I'm going to do some quick autistic head math for everyone right here. So you've got 7.8 million active cannabis users in the UK who are approximately consuming about £50 worth of cannabis each on average on a monthly basis. Probably a hell of a lot more, but let's say 50 quid. So that's about 350 million pounds worth of cannabis on a monthly basis being consumed in the UK, which is about £5 billion a year worth of cannabis being consumed in the UK at retail prices. Theoretically, if the government wanted to tax half of that, every penny they've just lost on COVID, they can get back in 3 years. And the problem is with that, okay, is that that's also not being paid attention to. As in, if they were to create a legal system tomorrow, recreational or medicinal, but they allowed access for anyone who wanted it, the billions of pounds which will be produced in the UK, creating jobs in the UK, tax paid in the UK, no criminals, like the amount of money it saves. I mean, like, I'm not a social political analyst, but if I was, I would look at this and I would see a trick, because there is definitely something here. And it's not my little, you know, like ethnocentric viewpoint from being inside of this culture and this community. I mean, there is definitely something here that the world is missing out on, because the amount, and I'll be honest with you guys, that budget of 50 quid is probably more like 400. So if you times that by 10, you're actually looking at 30 billion a year. I just thought I'd go in conservatively.
It's a multi-billion pound market, and that I never thought I'd advocate for tax collection. But, you know, if you work that multi-billion pound market, you charged corporation tax to the companies, you've got income tax from all those 100,000 employees. The government would, we reckon, take something like 400 to 500 million in tax income overall.
Wow.
And
I reckon they would do a hell of a lot more. I reckon they would do more.
That's conservative.
It's like really conservative.
That shows you the scale of things. And I would personally rather that it went to the government in tax income than in the pockets of the criminal fraternity.
This is a key issue, isn't it? This is an absolute key issue.
Or even better, the criminals won't be criminals anymore. Do you know what I mean? The criminals can pay their taxes. Let them pay their 60% tax. Charge the cannabis industry 20% more than you charge any industry out there. Give us you can literally do a special cannabis tax. 20% of every product goes straight to the government, and you can take 60% of all the money that's made, and there's still enough, and patients will still be paying a tenth of the price for their medicine. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
What you could do, we don't have a tradition of it in this country, but some of the American states have taken the cannabis tax income and invested it in related issues like drug dependency.
And reduce that down.
Addiction clinics. They've actually used that money for good for drugs. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Although, again, we say the UK doesn't have the tradition of earmarking tax for certain issues. But there's no reason why they shouldn't.
You could see how the media would go potty over that and just say, oh, the irony. You know, if I'd write the headline myself, you know, if it wasn't for the cannabis in the first place, we wouldn't need these clinics. And that's the way some of it would be twisted.
It would twist it around. Absolutely.
I've got a question for you, Professor Charles, is that they always say, you know, when America sneezes, Britain catches a cold. The opioid problem in America is gigantic. It seems to be ignored over here. But every time America does something, eventually, 5-10 years later, we do it. You know, we do it.
Yeah.
With the absolute chaos that the opioid crisis, and it's called that, isn't it, in America? Well, they're not people of a senior nature, not about me and Ollie yelling from the sidelines, but people of huge influence who are saying, look, you don't want this coming to Britain. This is a nightmare. We could cut it off at the pass. Why don't we look at alternatives? Has that ever come up in conversation?
Exactly. No, and it certainly should do. I mean, I think the figure was 48,000 deaths in the States, and you scale that down to our population, and we don't have so much of a crisis, but there are several thousand deaths in this country every year from deliberate or accidental opioid overdosage. And as I said earlier, if you introduce cannabis medically, you can substitute opioids for cannabis, or vice versa, and you get 25% less dose of opioids, so it's safer. And some people can stop the opioids, and you save about 25% of deaths. So even if there's, say, 2,000 deaths a year in this country, well, I think there's more than that, but let's be conservative again, you're going to save 500 deaths from simply introducing cannabis. Now, I think that's worth doing. And the number is actually a lot more than that. But for heaven's sake, that equation hasn't even come up as well. So I hope when our 10 recommendations for government paper came out from Maple Tree, which Hannah and I run, the government will listen to it. We're having to sort of go into lobbying and get some people to pay attention to it. I hope they do, so we get a proper industry.
I watched a documentary last week, and it was about the opioid crisis in America. Now, in America, they don't really have an NHS. So people who are buying opioids, they buy their opioids. It's all like a business. Everything's a business out there. And apparently, there's been this influx of smokable heroin, which has come back onto the market because it's a cheaper product than opioids. And what happens is that when someone dies from opioids, it's a medically induced death. When someone dies from heroin, it's a drug overdose. It's scheduled differently. But like a lot of these heroin users are only using heroin because they can't afford the oxy and they can't afford the fentanyl style drugs at the price at which they're being charged. So they're going for going for a subcategory, and there's this whole influx.
Very interesting. Gloria Miller, who lives in Santa Monica in California. There you go, straight away watching. Opioid crisis here in the USA is because of greedy pharmaceutical companies. That's from Gloria Miller, who's a very reasonable and delightful person.
We've seen that, haven't we, from federal prosecutions of some of the pharmaceutical companies in the States for pushing opioids when they knew it was dangerous. Absolutely, yes.
Very sad.
If you want to ever see something, and I'm sorry to take up 30 seconds of this conversation, a very dear friend of mine called Jim Meskimen, who's an actor and impressionist, has won several awards for a short film. The film is called Father and Son, and it's just a father and his son in a diner having a conversation, and you think it's going to go one way, and then it's so powerful of trying to explain the opioid crisis. It's called Father and Son with Jim Meskimen. If you're concerned in any way about this, have a look. It's a very short film, but it really sums it up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good.
So, Mr. Barnes, Professor Barnes, Dr. Mike. By the way, Mike, do you realize that your name is the same name as the bad guy from Karate Kid Part 3? You've realized that, haven't you? That's been dropped to you before, yeah?
No, I didn't.
Fine, so Daniel LaRusso fights Mike Barnes in Karate Kid Part 3 and beats him using the kick.
Right?
Yes, this is crazy.
No. Sorry,
I've missed so well. I can only apologize. It was
I'm so sorry. I've never dropped that before.
No idea. There's a Mike Barnes with if you Google it, I'm sad bugger that I am. I've Googled myself, and the top of the list is a jazz saxophonist in the States, which I rather like that actually.
That's good.
I've always rather liked being a jazz saxophonist. So if people think that, as long as you don't ask me to play, I'll go with that. Yeah.
What happened to the saxophone?
That's cool.
I missed that. In the 90s, it was the one, and now it's gone. So you are now the medical lead of Project 21, okay, which is incredible. Yes. Project 21 is a UK-based medical cannabis research project in affiliation with a few of the London top universities in order to get 21,000 patients signed up using medical cannabis. That's the aim, right?
Yep. So
first of all, congratulations! It's incredible, and I'm really happy that you're there and you've got an incredible team around you, and working alongside Professor Nutt and everything. I think it's amazing. Like, how's it all going there? How many patients have signed up? What's the plan? Is it moving as you want it to move? Are you getting resistance from government bodies? And like how is the Project 21 going?
It's going very well, and I didn't set it up. First thing to say, it was David Nutt and his team at Drug Science that set it up, and they've done a great job. I was only brought in about 3 months ago. As you said, the aim was to recruit 20,000 patients by the end of 2021, hence the name. I think that won't make that now. It's slowed down with COVID and everything else. But the recruitment is going quite well now. It's picking up last couple of months. We're just past 1,000 patients now. It is a very good quality, higher scientific quality audit, basically, observational study. So we don't influence what people have. We just follow when they do get something. I mean, we follow their pain scores and their anxiety scores and their epilepsy score and such like, and see what happens to them. And it's going to produce some really important data. Which hopefully will influence government and those cynics who said it's not going to do anything for anybody. They've already produced 3 papers in the very early data. So there'll be more papers produced. It will be the biggest cannabis audit, if you like, in the world by a long way. A good thing for the patients is not only they're contributing to that, which is useful, of course, but it limits the cost to £150 per prescription, which is basically per month. Now, still 150 times 12 is still a lot of money for a lot of people, but it's a damn sight cheaper than it used to be. And if you're not on that project, it's about half, give or take, the price if you're not on the T21 project. Not everyone can go on it. There's 7 conditions that you have to have, from pain, anxiety, Tourette's, substance use disorder, epilepsy. So it covers.
I can get in.
It covers most of the conditions.
You're a shoe in there, boy.
Get me in.
There you go.
Get me in. Get me in. We'll do it on the show. Let's do it. Let's do a live prescription on the show.
Do you realise, Professor Barnes, how either brave or stupid I am to have Ollie as a broadcaster who has Tourette's?
I'm freaking awesome, man. Come on. This is a brave
move. Yeah,
Thank you. I don't know, brave or completely mad. One of the two. It's paid off handsomely.
I basically feed him loads of CBD and it convinces him to do whatever I want him to do, which is kind of wonderful mind control CBD.
I'm under your Rasputin-like spell. Okay, so
that's it.
This is very interesting. So what are the 7? I'm so sorry because
we interrupted you.
Tourette's. The 7 conditions they were.
The main conditions we use, 60% of prescriptions in the clinics are pain, and pain is one of the allowable T21 conditions. That's the first. Excuse me. Adults with epilepsy. It would be children with epilepsy, except we can't find a pediatric prescriber, as we mentioned earlier. There's anxiety, PTSD, substance use disorder, because you can substitute, say, people on cannabis, high THC street cannabis dependency, you can substitute THC for CBD and get them slowly off it, sort of broadly equivalent to the sort of getting people off heroin programs with methadone. Not the same in any way, but you're a similar substitute one for another. Excuse me. And I've probably forgotten the 6th and 7th one, but it covers multiple sclerosis and therefore spasticity is the other one. So it covers 90% plus of all the referrals to the private clinics. So that's not a particular limiting factor, but the cost is great for the patient. It should be free on the NHS, of course, but it's great for the patient as we are at the moment. And it will produce really, really good high quality data.
It's fascinating stuff.
I want to be one of your patients.
There you go.
No, I want to be one of your patients, and I want to do it live. I want to do it live on air, so we can show people how easy it is to do a prescription. Let's do it.
You might have to get someone else to do it because I'm not prescribing now. But other than that, I'd say
no. So let's talk about this because I don't think people realize how simple it actually is. Okay, I feel like that's also I feel like we have walls in front of us who make us believe that this accessing medical cannabis is so difficult because all we hear is stories about how accessing medical cannabis is so difficult. And I think it will be good to show people that the process is actually a little bit more simple than they think, or what the process is. And to be honest with you, I don't think that's ever been done live on air before. I don't think there's ever been a live on air prescription of cannabis, and I think it'll be a really cool thing to do.
It's very easy. People can self-refer. They can get a doctor to refer for them, but if they fill out a questionnaire, takes 5 or 10 minutes. They give permission for the clinic to approach their GP, so they need a GP summary record. That's a bit of a delaying factor. Some GPs are very quick, some aren't. But you need that to confirm they've got a medical issue. With those 2 pieces of paper, you go in front of the doctor. He says, yes, I'll see the person. It's all telemedicine now, so it can be done online like this. You have a chat to the doctor for half an hour. He or she then decides whether you're eligible or not, writes you a prescription. That prescription has to be approved by another panel. It's a bit of a long-winded process, but that can be usually in the bigger clinics. That's in the same week. And once the prescription is approved, off it goes to the dispensary and off the cannabis arrives on your doorstep, usually a few days later. Now, that's not perfect. There's been delays sometimes. There's been issues in the clinics and whatever. But basically, it's as simple as that.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it live to show everyone how simple it is. And also, I have Tourette syndrome. I take meds for that. I've spoken to my doctor already about getting a self-referral. Let's actually do this because I feel like viewers out there need to see how simple it is. And if I can show people in my hour on a Thursday evening that is doable, I think it'll be a great thing to show people. If Russ lets me.
No, I think it's great. It's groundbreaking. Why not?
Exactly. Yeah. Something new. Something else.
There's no downside to it. Go on. You got 6 minutes, Ollie. So
CIC. You've got 5-6 minutes left. Tell us about this Cannabis Industry Council, which you've recently set up.
Yeah,
it's
that was another venture. Yeah.
What's the purpose and what's the aim of it? And how do you expect to what's the what are the expectations of the organization?
Yeah, well, it stemmed from the fact we developed, to go back very slightly, a thing called the Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society back in November 18, to gather basically doctor or clinicians, but mainly doctors together for education. I thought, well, that's a sort of, if you like, a trade body for cannabis doctors. So I thought, well, there's not a trade body for the cannabis industry. There's no group that represents the industry as a whole. And by a whole, I mean the whole. I mean everything from licensed producers, dispensaries, clinics, the hemp industry, the infrastructure, people like the Cannabis Health magazine, for example, parliamentary groups like the all-party parliamentary groups, law firms that specialize, banks, hopefully not one joined yet, but banks, everyone involved in the sector. There's no trade body, there's no thing that enables the industry to speak with one voice. They were beginning to speak with lots of disparate voices. And I thought, well, let's bring it all together. So I just wrote to initially about 70 or 80 firms and entities I knew of. That's now grown to 100. We've got our 100th member today. And it's good. And it seems to be a good idea at the right time, because we've only had so far one company refused, and that was a nice refusal in the sense we'd like to work with you, we don't want to join at the moment. As half a dozen who haven't bothered to reply. But that's good for the core, but par for the course. We've kept it broad. We've kept the fees down. There's another body that charges ridiculous sums to join them, which don't represent the industry.
So many bodies out there. So many terrible bodies out there. I mean, I'm not going to mention any names because we're a CBD manufacturer. We're in bed with a lot of them, but I hate them. Yeah, I freaking hate them. They're just con men. They're literally all con men. Anyway, sorry, Mike.
No, that's fine. So we wanted to set this up as represent the whole industry. We've only just started. We've got 6 subgroups now: a media group, a lobbying group, a standard. We need standards industry, and I think we need to build the industry up so it's a good quality, patient responsive, ethical industry. And I think we can do that. And hopefully, with that number, Parliament will listen to us, the government will listen to us. The media is beginning to listen to us. We do press releases and what have you. So I hope, it's very early days. The first face-to-face meeting is not till July the 7th. So we've only done a Zoom meeting and the subgroups so far. And I think it's here to stay. And I hope it represents the industry and does a good job at representing the industry and tries to move it from what it is at the moment to something media, coherent.
The media would be happy to, Men's Radio would be happy to lend their voice, whatever that might be.
Good. No, thank you very much. That's absolutely great. I'll get back to you with. I'll inundate you now. You shouldn't have said that. I'll now inundate you with endless press releases
and he's a ventriloquist. I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay.
At the end of the day, this entire industry is all about the people in it. It's like every market seems to forget that without consumers in that market, you're not a market. You're just an idea.
This is a consumer-driven industry.
It's all about the patients.
It's all about the patients. The patients effectively started as people like Hannah. And, the patients go to their doctor and they know a damn sight more about what they want than the doctor does, frankly.
Hell yeah.
So it's almost an upside down medical industry because it should be patient driven. I think some of the big firms need to remember that they need a patient consumer focus, and we need to do much better with our consumer relations than they have done, some of them so far.
It's because commercialization is a lot more important than and that's the issue. How many even in the CBD sector, do you know how many of our companies design products without actually thinking about the end user? That's why Taylor Mammon has always done so well, because we've always put effort and energy into that, and thought into that end user. And it's I do believe that the medical system as a whole is not really, it's not being as patient focused as it could be. Because if not, the kids would be getting what they needed, and I'm sure that adults would very happily supplement for kids. If I knew I had to pay 50% extra so an epileptic kid didn't die, very happily do it. Very happily do it on a monthly basis. From 200 to 300 to stop a kid dying, 1,000,000% every day of the week.
I'm sure there's many like you. Yeah, exactly.
Professor Barnes, it's rare that when somebody is, I'm going to use a common phrase, bigged up, as Ollie has mentioned to you, and so many people, that they live up to the reputation, and you have exceeded it.
Didn't even need to swear today. Didn't even need to swear. That's how good you are. I didn't have to emphasize the swear word.
But it's
and I didn't swear either. Oh, yeah, I heard one or two there.
You did.
Yeah.
You did. It's almost like you got Tourette's. Listen, thank you, Professor Mike Barnes. It's been an absolute pleasure. Ollie, an astounding guest. It's all down to you. I'm just a passenger here.
Thank you so much for giving us the show, man. It's all down to you.
Stop it. It's my pleasure. It's been amazing.
Hold on. To all of us.
All strength to you, Professor Barnes, for everything that you do. Until next week, take care.